Hi everyone, my name is Russian Adam. Welcome back to Areej Dore channel. In today's video, we have couple announcements. First of all, of course, the classics that are ready to be released and discussed in details. Another important point is that this collection marks a milestone in the history of Areej Dore. This classics is wrapping up chapter in our journey because we're preparing to launch our future anniversary collection. That collection will contain fragrances inspired by human civilizations from Stone Age, Golden Era, Industrial Revolution, all the way to the future. But this is a topic for another video. Before we dive into the classics, I would love to remind everyone, and especially those who first time watching our channel. We at Areej Dore focus on the most precious natural materials and very rare vintage ingredients. Natural materials such as oud, first of all, deer musk, natural ambergris. I personally distill oud as well as collect one-of-a-kind vintage materials, and then those are used by me to compose my olfactory compositions. As a result, many refer to our fragrances as collectible pieces of art. We would love to satisfy the growing demand, but unfortunately, most of the time it is not possible due to the limited nature of ingredients. Every new version of old fragrances have a unique flair, just as Mercedes S-Class, for example. Every new year model gives you the same feel of comfort and luxury, but each has a very unique character. We have 5 classic fragrances here. Each one of those was selected based on your requests. Thankfully, today we are closely connected with those interested in our art. From fellow perfume lovers, collectors, to the highest level professionals. We thank every single person for participating, for sharing your comments, your praise, and of course, constructive criticism that we pay very close attention to. Now let's dive into the fragrances in details. We begin with War and Peace. This fragrance has beaten all the records in terms of how fast Areej perfume can sell out. After War and Peace 1 was sold out in minutes, I received a number of messages, insulting messages, in fact. And I was very curious and very surprised, and I remember asking someone like, why you're so upset that you missed a fragrance that you haven't even tried? And he replied something like, everything about it is appealing and I must have it. I love the design, I love the story, I love the way it looks, and of course I want this precious to experience these precious ingredients that you utilized in this fragrance. War and Peace is based on Co-Absolute that I created. Co-Absolute means several materials were co-extracted together. And of course, I selected the most sought after, the most precious, the most challenging natural musks for this absolute. We have vintage, natural, deer musk, castoreum, ambergris, and this time I'm adding a fourth animalic, which is vintage royal civet. Those 4 were co-extracted together, and what happened is what I call blending on molecular level, when all the components infuse into one another, creating a perfect balance. War and Peace is also called one of the most challenging perfumes by Areej Dore. This is a fragrance that challenged the wearer. I myself wasn't really sure when I created the first version of War and Peace. I was going back to it within several months, and it was challenging me as a perfumer, and I was really stunned by it. And finally, I remember I smelled it and it just clicked. I realized that I have to release this fragrance. The main idea of War and Peace is a dramatic contrast between very challenging, dense, animalic notes with a very, very bright, peaceful type of notes that are represented in this composition by Taif rose and orris root. And of course, animalic nature, the war nature of this fragrance is represented by the co-absolute of musks. I added Indian oud to the formula, further enhancing the depth and complexity of this fragrance, and it's also added to these animalic facets of War and Peace. Crude amber oil still resides at the top of this composition, creating this stunning vintage antique type of feel. People compare the scent of it with the smell of gunpowder. There is a lot of resinous, smoky, and leather nuances to the fragrance. War and Peace 3 will be also available in the form of attar. Yes, you heard it right. There will be attars for most of the classic fragrances. War and Peace 3 Attar is a perfect choice and a perfect gift for the most adventurous animalic perfume lover. It is highly concentrated without any traces of perfumer's alcohol. It offers very similar dramatic contrast. However, in the pure oil, the animalic notes, the woody notes are more pronounced. So you get a longer lasting, more powerful, more complex experience that stays closer to the skin, just as most others do. Utluak. Utluak is a fragrance for those who truly appreciate and love two things, oud and coffee. And those two things have a lot in common actually. Main thing in common is the fermentation. Oud is fermented prior to distillation, creating a various bacteria that gives off the scent of barnyard, leather, chocolate, you name it. All these juicy, funky notes often comes from the fermentation process. The same thing with coffee. Coffee is harvested and then often fermented in order to bring out very unique and delicious flavors. Utluak number 1 featured coffee luwak. This time I decided that fermentation that I get with coffee luwak is not really enough, and I wanted to add extra layers of this delicious funk. So I used the same farm, we took the same coffee beans, but instead of luwak cat eating them, I created and designed a unique fermentation process. The beans were stored in the teak barrels for the period of 2 months. This created a mind-blowing aroma. When I first smelled this coffee, I was like, wow, this is actually smells like a very rich, very deep, very complex and funky Hindi oud. The coffee itself was almost undrinkable. That's how highly fermented it was. But it was perfect choice for a new version of Utluak where I wanted to use truly highly fermented coffee beans. Dark, jungly Maroke oud is still in the top notes of this fragrance along with coffee. Maroke oud is known for its very dark, earthy, jungly type of scent. And the main reason for that is the fact that the raw materials coming from underwater or underground, huge trees in the jungle die and fell many years ago. They are buried under the soil, under the water, and then digged out and processed into agarwood oil, giving them this damp, moist, dark, earthy, delicious type of scent that perfectly matches the scent of coffee. In the heart notes, I added vintage royal Burmese oud. The entire flacon of this royal oud was utilized for this fragrance. In the base we have Indian oud, various other notes that highlight the complexity of oud and coffee. Burmese oud was also infused with the natural vintage civet from the royal collection. By doing this, I tried to pay homage to the civet cat and add the animalic edge to the fragrance. Unfortunately, Attar of Utluak will not be available. And the simple reason is that I created this extract from the coffee beans that I fermented, and it was like a full spectrum extract based in ethanol, and it is not soluble in oil. For this reason, Utluak Attar will not be available. There will be only extract de parfum of Utluak. Curie de Russie. Curie de Russie is not just a fragrance. Curie de Russie actually is a perfume genre. Back in the day when French perfume houses still used to rely on natural musks, very high quality floral materials, almost every single house have to have Curie de Russie, just as perfumes of other popular genres like Chypre, Fougère, and so on. When I released Curie de Russie Part 1, many people was a bit frustrated because it became one of their most favorite fragrance, but it was garment perfume only. And the reason for that was a very old, unrectified birch tar that I utilized in the top notes of that fragrance. This time, of course, I'm making it 100% skin friendly, and I used fully purified and rectified birch tar in the top notes of this fragrance. The inspiration of this style, of course, comes from Imperial Russian Army when the officers were applying a special lotion to their shoes, and it was made of birch tar. It was making it extremely aromatic with the smoky notes, leathery notes, and even touches of animalic, very attractive sensual notes. Curie de Russie Part 2, just as Part 1, contains a very unique beaver tail oil, and it's piercing through the entire fragrance from the top notes all the way to the heart and the base. Beaver tail oil, it's like castoreum times 10. It is extremely pungent, animalic. It has a scent of this fermented, very wild, natural leather. In the heart of this fragrance, we have a very classical French accord of contrasting rose and jasmine. I further enhanced this accord and made it more exotic with addition of blue lotus. Curie de Russie too contains a very rare distilled oil of blue lotus and various other lotus absolutes. The further addition of vintage deer musk making the leather accord even more authentic and even more delicious. The animalics and the floral accord in Curie de Russie reminds us of the past era of French perfumery. Just as one of the greatest perfumers of the past said, every perfume is dropped unless you're uplifted with animalics. Natural animalics enhance other materials. They make fragrance more rich, more complex, giving it 3D effect and creating this sensual feel that is just impossible to achieve without the use of animalic notes. All what I mentioned, of course, is relevant to Curie de Russie Attars that will be available. And again, on skin, it might be even more animalic. Your skin might amplify more of the sensuality of this fragrance, just like Valima Attar in the past. Many reported that it is more robust, it is more masculine, it is more smoky. The oud comes out more in the form of attar, and the perfume is more feminine and powdery and floral, even though the formula and the batch was exactly the same. So I expect something similar with Curie de and other attars. Inveraruso. Inveraruso is another fragrance that was requested to be remade a number of times. The inspiration of this fragrance comes from a feeling when we sit by the fireplace in a very comfortable place, comfortable position within our house or our apartments, and then we're looking out from the window, witnessing the dance of snow outside and realizing how severe and how brutal the cold outside is. Yet we are being safe, we are being hugged by this wonderful comfort of our home. In the top notes of Inveraruso 2, I added a very unique co-distillation. I distilled green hojari frankincense with a touch of ambergris in Omani rose water. This created this slight touch of coolness that reminds us of the cold outside. However, immediately we are moving into the heart of this fragrance that contains a very creamy, spicy, sweet floral notes, and those represent a very warm comfort of our home. Highly aged Chinese oud is still a star of this fragrance. I also added another layer of classical cheesy Laotian oud, and this of course reminds us of a brutal, wild nature of winter. Overall, a new formula of Inveraruso is a bit more nuanced in terms of oud used. I try to use a higher quality floral notes in order to create this very warm, creamy heart. Antiquity. I thought that I will never be able to recreate Antiquity. But of course, it was requested and I had to challenge myself. I had to at least try. Then I came across this dark carnation accord. Original Antiquity carnation accord comes from a very vintage collection. When I first smelled it, I don't know, I nearly cried. It was like a fragrance on its own, and it was so rich and so deep, and it just gave me so much information. Recently, thankfully, Alhamdulillah, I came across a very similar dark carnation accord. As soon as I smelled it, I knew, yes, I will try to recreate Antiquity formula. Then I added extra layers of oak moss, more natural vintage deer musk, much higher portion of oud, trying to match this depth and complexity, and as a result, bam, I was there and I smelt it and I was like, yeah, this is not just close enough, maybe even I like it better. And I said, yes, I will remake Antiquity. My experiments were 100% successful. Antiquity Part 1 is all about vintage feel. Some describe this fragrance as traveling back in time on a train and watching through the window how these different eras of perfumery are evolving. It's all about peach, carnation, leather accord, and lots of patchouli perfectly blended with Cambodian oud. So I selected my most favorite Cambodian oud at the moment, probably, and I blended with my favorite note of patchouli. Patchouli that I personally distilled several years ago. It is a highly fermented patchouli. Patchouli that smells like no other patchouli in the world. When Ramsey, in fact, smelled this patchouli, he said this is more like oud, like the complexity, the barnyard notes, the different animalic facets of it gives you impression of a high quality oud, but it is in fact patchouli. So this very batch of patchouli was utilized in Antiquity Part 2. The most powerful, the most impactful, and the most long-lasting creation in this collection is probably Antiquity Attar. When I open the lid, I don't even have to open the bottle. It's kind of filling the room already. And it is an Attar. So I was truly impressed by the performance and the impact of Antiquity Attar that will be also available. Here you have it, guys. This is the new classic collection with a twist. We have a full set as usual. It will be available at this date, at this time. Please make sure you come on time if you wish to pre-order in order to avoid any disappointments. Attar full sets will be also available at this very date. Soon after the full sets will be sold out, we will offer individual bottles. Of course, let's take a minute to experience and enjoy the presentation, and thank you so much for watching. Have a good time. Bye.